Olivia and David opened their first investment accounts in the same month, with almost the exact same amount of money. Olivia picked the fund her bank recommended. David spent 40 minutes comparing something most people don't even know is different from one fund to the next. 30 years later, David's account is worth almost $200,000 more than Olivia's. Neither of them picked bad investments. Neither of them timed the market or found some secret stock. The entire gap came from one number so small that Olivia never thought to question it. 1%. This is the rule wealthy people actually obsess over, and almost nobody else even registers it as something worth their attention. Here's what happened. Olivia's fund charged an annual fee of about 1.1%. David's charged about 0.1%. On paper, that's a 1% difference. It sounds almost too small to bother calculating. Most people, looking at those two numbers side by side, would shrug and move on with their day. That shrug is the entire story of this video. 1%. On its own, in a single year, barely registers. It's $100 on $10,000. Most people spend more than that on takeout in a slow month, so it genuinely doesn't feel worth the 40 minutes of comparison shopping. This isn't Olivia being careless. It's Olivia's brain doing exactly what brains are built to do, treating small percentages as functionally the same as zero. Because in the moment, on a single year, on a single account, they nearly are. But money invested doesn't experience a single year. It experiences decades, compounding on top of itself. And 1% compounding against you for 30 straight years stops being a rounding error and becomes the difference between two completely different retirements. Here's the actual math. And it's worth sitting with for a second, because it's more dramatic than it sounds. Both Olivia and David invested the same $100,000. David's investments grew at roughly 7% a year. After fees, Olivia's grew at roughly 6%. After her slightly higher fee ate into the same underlying return. That 1 percentage point, held constant for 30 years, turned David's $100,000 into about $760,000. Olivia's turned into about $574,000. Same starting amount, same market, same 30 years. A gap of nearly $200,000. Entirely explained by a fee difference most people wouldn't bother switching banks over. This is why wealthy investors, and the institutions that manage serious money, treat 1% completely differently than everyone else does. Not because they're smarter about math, because they've internalized something most people never get taught at scale. Over time, 1% isn't small. It's the whole game. Consider how differently a pension fund manager thinks about this compared to an individual investor. A fund managing $1 billion will spend enormous effort negotiating a fee down by 0.1%. Because on that scale, 0.1% is $1 million a year. Nobody at that table shrugs. Nobody says it's basically the same. The number is treated with total seriousness every single time, because everyone in the room has already done the math on what small percentages become at scale. Individual investors rarely do that math, not because they couldn't, but because nobody ever sits them down and makes the 30-year version of the number feel real in the moment they're actually choosing. There's a well-known phrase in investing circles for exactly this idea: the tyranny of compounding costs, popularized by Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, who spent much of his career trying to convince ordinary investors that fees, which look microscopic in any given year, quietly become the single biggest factor in how much money they actually retire with. Not stock picking, not market timing. Fees. The most boring number on the page turned out to be the number that mattered most. The reason this stays invisible to most people is almost entirely psychological, not mathematical. Humans are naturally wired to pay attention to differences that feel big in the moment: a stock that doubled, a hot new investment everyone's talking about, a scary headline about a market crash. Those things produce an emotional reaction. A 1% fee produces nothing. There's no headline, no dramatic chart, no story to tell at dinner. It just quietly sits there, identical looking, year after year, until 3 decades later it turns out to have been the loudest number in the entire account. The whole time, disguised as the quietest one. There's a specific reason percentages fool us in particular. more than dollar amounts do. $100 fee feels concrete, you can picture exactly what it would buy. A 1% fee feels abstract, almost like a unit of measurement rather than real money. Right up until you multiply it against a large enough number for long enough time. Olivia wasn't bad at math. She just never did the specific multiplication that would have made the abstract number concrete, because nothing in the moment prompted her to. David, mostly by habit rather than genius, always did. Wealthy people and institutional investors didn't figure this out through willpower or discipline. They figured it out by treating percentages as seriously as they treat dollar amounts. On principle, every single time, regardless of how small the percentage looks in the moment it's presented. It became a rule, not a judgment call they made fresh each time, because judgment calls are exactly where a brain that's numb to small percentages quietly loses. Again and again, in a way that never feels like losing. This 1% habit doesn't just apply to fund FEs. It shows up in interest rates on debt, where a 1% difference on a mortgage, held for 30 years, is easily worth tens of thousands of dollars. It shows up in raises and salary negotiations, where accepting 1% less because asking felt awkward compounds across an entire career. It shows up in interest earned on savings, where one bank quietly pays 1% less than another for doing nothing differently at all. None of these moments feel dramatic enough to fight for. All of them compound exactly the same way David's fee difference did. So here's the actual rule, and it's simpler than it sounds. Whenever you're comparing two financial options, two funds, two loans, two accounts, two offers, and the difference between them is described as just 1%, stop treating that sentence as reassuring. Treat it as the exact moment your attention is supposed to kick in, not switch off. The word just in front of a percentage is doing an enormous amount of quiet work to make you stop paying attention at precisely the moment it matters most. You don't need to become obsessive about every percentage point in your life. You need exactly one habit before accepting any financial default the fund your bank suggests, the rate you're offered without asking, the fee that's just how it's always been. Spend the same 40 minutes David did once, comparing the actual number against the alternative. Not because 40 minutes is dramatic, because 30 years from now, that 40 minutes is worth roughly $200,000, and almost nobody ever spends it, for exactly the reason you'd expect. 1% just doesn't feel like enough to bother with. It is. It's the whole game, hiding in plain sight, one quiet decimal point at a time. Olivia isn't a cautionary tale in the way Derek was a few videos back. She didn't do anything wrong. Exactly, she did what almost everyone does, which is trust that a small-sounding number is a small mattering number. The uncomfortable truth is that the two aren't the same thing, and the entire financial industry is built in a way that makes it very easy to never notice the difference until decades have already passed. If this changed how you look at the fine print, subscribe, because next week, we're telling the story of two co-workers with the exact same salary who retired 11 years apart. And it had nothing to do with how much either of them earned. Same honest stories, same simple truth. See you in the next one.